The small diner was quiet in the late afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, casting a warm glow over the worn-out tables and chairs. Lila moved quickly behind the counter, her apron slightly stained but neatly tied around her waist. She had worked in the diner for several years, and every corner of the place felt like a part of her life. Even though the work was hard and the pay was barely enough to cover her small apartment, she loved the simplicity of it. There was something honest about serving food, about talking to people, about feeling needed, even if only for a short while. Her day had started early. Before the sun even touched the city streets, she had already been up, preparing breakfast for herself, which was often just a small piece of bread with some jam. Then she had walked the long way to the diner because the bus fare was too expensive. The streets were quiet then, but not for long. The city would awaken, and soon the air would be full of noise, cars and people rushing to their jobs. She had grown used to the rhythm, the rush, the constant little battles of survival that came with living paycheck to paycheck. By the time the diner opened, she was already tired, but she didn't show it. She wiped the counters, arranged the chairs neatly, and made sure every plate and cup was spotless. Her boss was a kind man in his 50s, though he rarely had time to talk. He trusted Lila more than any of the other employees because she was reliable, hardworking, and always treated the customers with genuine care. Lila's hands moved with a practiced rhythm, pouring coffee, serving toast, and taking orders with a polite smile. The diner wasn't always full. Most afternoons were slow, with just a few regulars dropping by for a cup of coffee or a quick meal. Lila didn't mind. She liked the quiet moments too, when she could wash dishes while humming softly, or when she could stare out of the window and watch the world go by. There was a beauty in ordinary life, she thought. It wasn't always easy, but it had its small comforts: the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of a customer, the way sunlight bounced off the metal counter. That afternoon, as she refilled the sugar jar and wiped down a table near the window, she noticed a small girl standing outside. The girl was no more than 8 or 9, with messy hair and clothes that looked worn. Her shoes were scuffed, and she held a small tattered bag close to her chest. She looked around nervously as if she wasn't sure where to go, her small face shadowed with worry. Lila's heart tightened. She had seen children wandering the streets before, some with parents nearby, some without, but there was something different about this girl. She didn't cry or shout. She just stood there quietly, looking lost. Without thinking, Lila walked to the door and opened it. "Hey there," she said gently. "Do you want to come inside? It's warm and I can get you something to eat." The girl hesitated, her large, dark eyes flicking to Lila, then to the inside of the diner. After a moment, she nodded slightly and stepped in. Lila led her to a small table in the corner, the one by the window. It was the coziest spot in the diner, with soft sunlight falling over the table and a view of the busy street outside. "Sit down," Lila said, smiling. "I'll be right back with something for you." The girl lowered herself onto the chair, hugging her bag tightly. Lila noticed the way her hands trembled slightly. She went behind the counter, grabbed a cup of hot chocolate, and placed it gently in front of the girl. Then she added a small plate with a sandwich and some fruit. "Here," she said softly. "Eat something. You look like you haven't had a proper meal today." The girl looked down at the food, her eyes wide, as if she had never seen anything like it before. Then she slowly took the sandwich and took a small bite. Lila watched her from across the counter, her heart swelling. "Are you okay?" she asked after a moment of silence. The girl nodded, barely whispering, "Yes." Lila wanted to ask more, but she didn't want to scare the girl away. Instead, she went back to her work, serving a few customers who had just arrived, all the while keeping an eye on the little girl. She noticed that the girl ate slowly, carefully, as if each bite mattered. There was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself, a kind of bravery that Lila admired. Over the next few days, the girl returned, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening. Each time, Lila greeted her warmly, always ready with food and a comforting smile. They didn't talk much at first. The girl was shy, reserved, and careful with her words. But Lila didn't mind. She knew that trust couldn't be forced. She simply offered kindness, consistency, and a safe space. Lila's life was far from easy. She worked long hours, often missing lunch or dinner herself. Some nights she would return to her small apartment exhausted, her body aching, and yet she felt a strange sense of purpose when she thought about the little girl. There was a joy in giving and seeing someone else feel cared for, even if it meant a little sacrifice on her part. As the weeks passed, the girl, who had finally told Lila her name was Mia, began to open up. She would speak in small sentences, sharing bits of her day, her school, and the tiny joys she found in simple things, like drawing or reading. Lila listened patiently, offering encouragement, praising her efforts, and gently guiding her when Mia seemed unsure. One rainy afternoon, Mia didn't come in right away. Lila worried. She wiped down the tables and peered through the rain-streaked windows, hoping to see the small figure of the girl making her way to the diner. After a while, the door opened slowly and Mia stepped inside, drenched and shivering. Lila immediately wrapped a warm towel around her and poured her a cup of hot chocolate. "Why didn't you come earlier?" Lila asked gently, helping her dry off. Mia shivered and whispered, I had to wait for the bus and it was late. I didn't want to get anyone wet." Lila smiled, understanding that Mia had her own small challenges and responsibilities. She didn't ask too many questions. Instead, she sat across from her, chatting softly, sharing small stories about her day at the diner, making Mia laugh. By the time the hot chocolate was finished, Mia was smiling, her earlier fear and loneliness fading. Lila often thought about her own childhood during these moments. She had grown up in a modest home, learning early the value of kindness and hard work. She remembered the teachers who had encouraged her, the neighbors who had helped her family in small ways, and the quiet lessons she had learned about resilience and compassion. She wanted to pass that on to Mia, even if it was just in small, ordinary ways, through a warm meal, a kind word, or a listening ear. There was a rhythm to their days now. Mia would appear, shy at first but slowly opening up. Lila would offer her food, comfort, and gentle conversation. And even though Lila didn't know what the future held for either of them, there was a quiet hope in the little routines they had created. One evening, after closing the diner, Lila washed the last dishes and turned off the lights. She looked out the window at the empty street and thought about Mia, sitting in her small corner, finding warmth in the simplest things. Lila realized that even in the hardest times, the smallest acts of kindness could create connections that mattered. She didn't have much, but what she could give, her time, attention, and care, was more valuable than anything money could buy. And so, in the small, quiet diner on the corner of a busy street, a bond was forming. Two lives, so different in many ways, were touching each other in ways neither could fully understand yet. Lila, the struggling waitress, gave not out of obligation, but out of a genuine heart. And Mia, the lonely little girl, began to find a safe place in the world where someone truly cared for her. Little did Lila know this was only the beginning. The story of their friendship, of trust and care, was going to grow in ways that would surprise both of them. And in those quiet afternoons over sandwiches and hot chocolate, life was teaching them both a simple truth, that sometimes the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference. Mia began to visit the diner more often. Some days she would quietly slip in after school, her small bag bouncing on her shoulder. Other days she would appear in the late afternoon, when the sun was low and golden light filled the diner. Each time, Lila greeted her with the same warm smile, a small but steady comfort in the child's uncertain life. At first, Mia spoke very little. She would sit at her corner table, unwrap her sandwich slowly, and sip her hot chocolate quietly, her eyes wandering around the diner as if she were seeing everything for the first time. Lila never pressured her to talk. She understood that trust took time, especially for a child who seemed so shy and careful with her words. Instead, she offered small gestures, a napkin tucked under her chin, a plate filled with her favorite food, a cup of cocoa just the right temperature. Gradually, Mia began to open up, sharing small details about her days. "I like reading," she said one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just started a new book. It's about a girl who travels to faraway places." Lila smiled, happy to hear her speak. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "What's her favorite place so far?" Mia looked thoughtful, her eyes distant for a moment. "The mountains. She says they are quiet and you can hear yourself think there." Lila nodded. "I understand that. Quiet places are special. They make you feel calm inside." The small conversation was simple, but for Mia it was a step. She had never been asked about her thoughts or dreams with such patience before. Lila listened without judgment, without rushing her, and that was something Mia cherished more than she could express. Over the next few weeks, their bond grew. Mia would bring little drawings she made at school, shyly sliding them across the table for Lila to see. Lila admired each one, commenting on the colors, the creativity, and the details. She never criticized, never rushed her, only praised and encouraged. Mia began to laugh more, her small chuckles filling the diner with a new warmth. Lila's life outside the diner was still hard. She worked long hours, often missing meals herself. Some nights she would come home, her feet sore, her back aching, yet she found herself thinking about Mia, wondering if she had eaten well, if she had smiled that day. Lila had grown used to carrying burdens silently, but there was something different about this one. She wanted to protect Mia, not because she had to, but because she cared. One rainy afternoon, Mia arrived at the diner soaked and shivering. Lila immediately noticed the tiny frown on her face and the way her small hands trembled as she held her wet coat. "Come here," Lila said gently, wrapping a towel around her shoulders. "Let's get you warm first." Mia's lips quivered slightly as she nodded. She was always polite, always careful not to complain even when she was uncomfortable. Lila admired this quietly, though she also wanted Mia to feel safe enough to let go, to express herself freely. She poured a cup of hot chocolate and placed it in front of her, steam curling up to the ceiling. "Drink this slowly," Lila said. "It will help warm you up." Mia took small sips, and soon the frown on her face softened. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at Lila with a shy but genuine smile. "You don't have to thank me," Lila replied softly. "I like helping you. It makes me happy." Mia's small fingers fiddled with the edge of her napkin as if she wasn't used to hearing such words. She looked down at her drink, and Lila could see a tiny flicker of relief in her eyes. It was a subtle change, but to Lila, it meant the world. As days passed, Mia began to share more about herself. She talked about school, her favorite subjects, the games she played with friends, and the small adventures she imagined in her mind. Sometimes she would confide small fears, like being alone in the playground or feeling invisible among her classmates. Lila listened patiently, offering comfort without judgment, giving advice in gentle words or simply nodding and holding space for Mia's thoughts. "You know," Lila said one afternoon as they sat by the window, "sometimes being alone doesn't mean being lonely. You can find peace in your own company and the little things that make you happy." Mia tilted her head thoughtfully. "But I don't always know what makes me happy," she admitted quietly. "That's okay," Lila said with a soft smile. "Part of life is discovering that. And when you do, even small joys can feel big." Lila realized that Mia was not just a lonely child. She was curious, thoughtful, and unusually observant. She noticed things others might miss: the pattern of raindrops on the window, the way light reflected off a spoon, the small movements of people around her. Lila admired this quietly. It reminded her that children could see the world in ways adults often forgot. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Lila found herself exhausted. She had barely had time to eat, running from table to table, taking orders, serving food, and wiping counters. Mia sat in her corner, quietly drawing in her notebook. Lila watched her for a moment, noticing the concentration on her small face, the careful way she moved her pencil. "You're very focused," Lila said softly. Mia looked up and nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I like drawing," she said simply. "You're very good at it," Lila replied. "I hope you keep drawing no matter what." Mia's eyes brightened slightly, as if she had never been told that she was good at something before. Lila realized then that the small encouragements she offered mattered more than she had imagined. It wasn't just about feeding the child or keeping her warm. It was about giving her a sense of worth, making her feel seen and appreciated. Lila also began noticing little habits of Mia's that made her more endearing. She would hum softly while eating, carefully fold her napkin after finishing a meal, or glance out the window as if lost in thought. Each gesture was small but full of personality, and Lila cherished them. She often caught herself smiling, feeling a warmth in her heart that had little to do with her own struggles and everything to do with the connection she was forming with Mia. Sometimes, Lila worried about the child's home life. Mia rarely mentioned her parents or family. When asked gently, she would just shake her head or smile faintly, as if it was too complicated to explain. Lila didn't push. She knew that children sometimes held back because they wanted to protect themselves. Instead, she focused on being a steady presence, someone who cared without conditions or expectations. As autumn approached, the air in the city turned crisp. Leaves fell in golden swirls, and the diner became a small refuge from the chill outside. Mia continued to visit regularly, her coat a little thicker now, her cheeks rosy from the cold. She seemed more comfortable, more willing to talk about little things, her favorite teacher, a funny story from school, a new book she had started reading. Lila noticed a small change in herself, too. She looked forward to Mia's visits in a way she hadn't expected. Even on the hardest days, knowing the little girl would appear gave her strength. It reminded her that her efforts, though small, had meaning. Life was difficult and the world was often unfair, but moments like these made it worthwhile. One rainy afternoon, Mia arrived carrying a small, folded piece of paper. She handed it to Lila shyly. "I made this for you," she said softly. Lila opened it carefully. It was a drawing, a picture of the diner with Lila behind the counter smiling and Mia sitting at her corner table. The colors were bright, cheerful, and full of life. Lila's eyes welled up with tears. She hugged the paper to her chest, looking at the child with a warmth she couldn't fully describe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you, Mia. I'll treasure it." Mia blushed, hiding her small smile. "I wanted to, because you're nice to me," she said quietly. Lila reached across the table and gently touched Mia's hand. "You're very kind too," she said. "And I'm happy we met. You make my days better just by being here." In those quiet afternoons over food, drawings, and gentle conversation, a bond had formed. Lila and Mia shared more than meals. They shared moments of understanding, trust, and care. Lila was teaching Mia in her own simple ways that the world could be kind, that someone could care without expecting anything in return. And Mia, with her quiet presence and small gestures, was teaching Lila that even in a life filled with struggle, there could be moments of light and warmth. By the time the diner closed for the night, Mia would leave reluctantly, carrying her little bag and giving a shy wave. Lila would watch her disappear into the street, hoping she was safe and warm. And though the nights were long and the apartment she returned to was small and bare, Lila felt a quiet peace. She knew that she was making a difference, however small, in the life of a child who needed care and attention more than anything else. And so, day after day, the little routines continued. Mia visited, Lila cared, and slowly, quietly, their friendship grew. It wasn't a friendship of grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was built in the small, human details: a warm meal, a listening ear, a shared smile, and the simple, unwavering presence of someone who cared. Little did Lila know, her simple acts of kindness were only the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. Mia's visits became a quiet rhythm in Lila's life. Some days she would show up with her small bag over her shoulder, sometimes dragging her feet as though the weight of the world rested lightly on her young shoulders. Other days she came skipping in with a smile so wide it warmed the coldest corners of the diner. Lila had come to know every small detail of the girl's routine: how she fidgeted with her pencil while drawing, how she liked her chocolate just slightly sweet, and how she would carefully fold her napkin after finishing her meal. One afternoon, the diner was busier than usual. Rain drummed heavily against the windows, and the smell of wet earth mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee and bread inside. Mia arrived a little late, slipping quietly through the door, her coat dripping and shoes muddy. Lila noticed immediately. "Come here quickly," she said, guiding the girl to her corner table. She grabbed a towel, helping Mia dry off while the girl shivered. Lila placed a hot chocolate and a small plate of food in front of her. Mia didn't speak much at first. She ate slowly, glancing out the window at the rain as if the world outside held secrets she wanted to understand. Lila watched her quietly from behind the counter, her heart tugging. She wondered what it must be like for a child to face the world with so much caution, so much care in her small gestures. Mia wasn't just lonely. There was a quiet resilience in her, a strength that spoke without words. "Do you like drawing?" Lila asked gently, noticing Mia pull out a small notebook and pencil from her bag. Mia looked up, her eyes cautious but curious. "Yes, I like it a lot," she said softly. "It helps me think." "That's wonderful," Lila replied, smiling. "Drawing can help us understand feelings we can't always say out loud." Mia nodded slowly, turning back to her paper. She began sketching quietly, her tiny hand moving with surprising confidence. Lila watched the lines take shape, the curves and angles forming something meaningful. She didn't ask what the drawing was. She simply admired the effort and the care Mia put into every stroke. Over time, Mia began sharing more about herself, though always carefully. She told small stories about school, about lessons she liked, and about friends she had, though the details were sparse. "I like math," she admitted one afternoon, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. "Numbers make sense. They don't lie." "That's true," Lila said thoughtfully. "Numbers are honest. But stories are honest too, in their own way. They tell us about people, about feelings." Mia considered this for a moment, nodding slowly. Lila realized that the girl was not just curious. She was thoughtful, observant in ways that children often were not. She noticed things most adults ignored. The way sunlight reflected off the wet street, the rhythm of raindrops, the small details in the lives of people passing by. Lila admired this quietly, realizing that Mia's attentiveness was a gift, even if it was paired with the solitude she carried so carefully. One evening, as the diner neared closing time, Mia hesitated before leaving. She seemed unusually quiet, her small shoulders tense. Lila noticed immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, walking to her side. Mia shook her head slightly. I had to wait outside longer today. The rain, it was heavy, and I didn't want to get anyone wet," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Lila's heart ached. "You don't have to worry about that here," she said softly. "This diner is always warm. You're always welcome, rain or shine, and you don't need to carry the world on your small shoulders." Mia's eyes glistened slightly and she nodded, taking a small sip of the hot chocolate. Lila realized that the girl carried her solitude like a shield. She had grown used to protecting herself, to being careful, to observing before trusting. Lila's kindness, consistent and quiet, was slowly helping her lower that shield, if only a little. As autumn deepened, Lila noticed subtle changes in Mia. She laughed more easily, her small chuckles bright and unforced. She shared tiny victories from school, a good grade, a drawing the teacher liked, a story she had written. Lila praised each accomplishment, not because she wanted anything in return, but because she genuinely felt joy in the girl's small triumphs. One day, while wiping down the counter, Lila noticed Mia staring out of the window, her face calm but thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. Mia hesitated. "I'm wondering about people. Why some are happy and some are not. And why the world feels so big sometimes," she said quietly. Lila nodded, understanding. The world is big, and sometimes it can be confusing or even unfair. But there are small places, small people, small moments that make it better. You just have to find them. Mia's eyes met hers, a flicker of trust in them. "Do you think I'll find them?" she asked. "I know you will," Lila said softly. "And sometimes people appear in our lives to help us see those moments." Mia smiled faintly, her eyes dropping to her drawing. Lila realized that their friendship had become one of those small, meaningful moments. It wasn't built on grand gestures or loud declarations. It was built on trust, patience, and quiet presence. It was about noticing the little things and making them matter. Lila's own life continued to be difficult. Bills piled up, the rent was always due, and her shifts were long and tiring. Some days she barely had enough to eat. Yet she found herself thinking about Mia, wondering if the child had smiled that day, or if she had felt safe. Lila had grown accustomed to struggle, but caring for Mia gave her purpose beyond her own hardships. She wanted the girl to feel warmth, safety, and a sense of belonging, even if it was only within the small walls of the diner. One rainy afternoon, a new customer arrived while Mia was sitting quietly in her corner. Lila took the order, smiling politely, and then glanced back at Mia. She noticed that the girl had become unusually guarded when a well-dressed man approached the counter, speaking briefly with her. Mia's small hand tightened around her pencil, her eyes flickering with a mix of curiosity and unease. Lila's heart beat a little faster. Something felt different. After the man left, Mia didn't speak for several minutes. Lila watched her quietly, unsure whether to ask. Finally, she said softly, "You can tell me anything, you know. I won't judge. I just want to make sure you're okay." Mia looked down at her drawing, then back at Lila, a small frown on her face. I can't talk about him." "Not yet," she whispered. Lila nodded, understanding. She didn't press. She knew that children often held back because they needed to feel safe first. She returned to her work, but her mind lingered on Mia. There was a story there, something important, something hidden, and Lila realized that she would need patience, as always, to earn the girl's trust fully. Over the next few weeks, the hints of Mia's unusual background became more noticeable. She spoke of things in her home that didn't match the life of an ordinary child. There were glimpses of expensive belongings, quiet mentions of people who seemed important, and subtle hints of a world that was very different from Lila's own. Yet Mia never bragged, never flaunted anything. She simply mentioned things in passing, almost as if they were secrets she wasn't sure anyone should know. Lila found herself curious, but she didn't let it show. She continued to treat Mia the same way she always had, with patience, care, and genuine kindness. She knew that whatever Mia's life outside the diner might be, it didn't change the importance of the moments they shared here. The warmth of a meal, the comfort of a listening ear, and the quiet reassurance of being seen mattered more than any wealth or status. One evening, as the diner emptied and the last few customers left, Mia stayed behind to finish a drawing. Layla watched her quietly. The girl's small hand moved steadily across the paper, her face calm, her eyes focused. Lila realized that these moments, the quiet, ordinary moments, were the ones that truly mattered. They built trust, connection, and a sense of safety. And she knew that the world outside the diner might be confusing or even harsh, but inside, Mia had a place where she belonged. As Lila closed the diner for the night, she helped Mia gather her things. "See you tomorrow?" she asked gently. Mia nodded, her small smile shy but genuine. "Yes," she whispered. Walking home later, Lila thought about the bond they were forming. It was quiet, subtle, and powerful in its own way. She realized that it didn't matter what Mia's life was like outside the diner. What mattered was that she could be a safe person in the child's life, someone who offered kindness, care, and understanding. And so day by day, rain or shine, laughter or silence, their friendship grew. Lila's life remained challenging, but the connection she had with Mia gave her strength, hope, and a quiet joy she had not expected. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing. Sometimes the smallest acts of care could have the biggest impact. Little did Lila know, the hints she had begun to notice were only the beginning. The truth about Mia's life, about the world she came from, was much closer than she imagined. And when it arrived, it would change everything. The diner was unusually busy that afternoon. Rain drizzled steadily outside, leaving streaks across the tall windows. Lila moved quickly behind the counter, balancing plates and cups while keeping a smile on her face. She had learned over the years to manage the chaos, to move with rhythm and precision even when her arms ached and her feet protested. Yet today, something felt different. Mia arrived, as she often did, quietly slipping in through the door. But Lila noticed a subtle change in the girl's expression. Her small face was serious, her dark eyes scanning the diner as if she were unsure where to sit. Lila's heart tightened. "Hey, come here," she said gently, guiding Mia to her usual corner table. She wrapped a towel around the girl, noticing how damp her hair and coat were. Mia hesitated, glancing toward the entrance of the diner. Lila followed her gaze and saw a well-dressed man speaking briefly with someone at the counter. The sight didn't alarm Lila at first, but she felt a quiet tension in Mia's posture. The little girl clutched her pencil and notebook tightly, as if holding on to something precious. After a few minutes, Mia finally spoke in a small, hesitant voice. "That man, he's my dad," she whispered, almost afraid the words would carry too far. Lila froze for a moment. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Your dad?" she repeated softly, careful not to startle Mia. Mia nodded. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes downcast. "He's very rich," she said quietly. "He doesn't know I come here. I like it here because no one treats me differently." Lila's mind raced. She had always known that Mia was not an ordinary child. There had been little hints, small glimpses of a world far removed from her own, but she had never imagined anything like this. Her heart ached for the little girl, who carried a life so unusual, so separate from the simple world of the diner. "Hey," Lila said gently, reaching across the table to touch Mia's hand lightly. "You don't have to worry about that here. This is your place, No one will ever treat you differently. You're just Mia here, and I like it that way. Mia's small fingers twitched slightly under Lila's hand. She looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I just want to be normal sometimes, she whispered. You are normal, Lila said softly, shaking her head. You're a kid who likes chocolate, who draws, who likes to laugh. That's what normal is. Being around people who care. That's what matters. For the first time, Mia allowed herself a small smile. She reached for her hot chocolate, sipping slowly, as if trying to absorb the comfort Lila offered. Lila watched her quietly, realizing that the revelation about her father had been heavy, but Mia's trust in her had not wavered. In fact, it seemed stronger, deeper, built on the small, consistent acts of care they had shared over weeks and months. Later that evening, as the diner quieted down and the last customers left, the man whom Mia had called her father approached the counter again. Lila noticed the careful, polite way he spoke to the staff, his attention divided as though he were aware of the importance of every word. Lila's curiosity surged, but she didn't want to pry. She knew this was Mia's story to tell, not hers. After a while, he approached Mia's table. Mia looked up at him nervously, her small body tense. Lila observed quietly, her heart heavy with concern and curiosity. The man knelt down slightly, speaking to her in a soft, measured tone. Though Lila couldn't hear every word, she could see the mixture of authority and care in his posture. Mia listened, nodding slightly, but she didn't stand or leave with him immediately. Instead, she looked across the table at Lila, her small eyes filled with a question. Could she trust the world beyond this diner? Could she step out of the safe space she had built with someone who had only wanted to care for her? Lila reached out, gently squeezing her hand, silently telling her that whatever choice she made, she would be supported. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mia stood. She nodded to the man, then turned back to Lila. I'll come back tomorrow, she said softly. Lila smiled, though her heart was heavy. I'll be here, she said. Always. That night, Lila closed the diner and walked home slowly, her mind racing with thoughts. She thought about Mia's life, about the wealth and influence her father must have, and about the innocence that had remained untouched within the little girl despite her unusual circumstances. She thought about the trust Mia had placed in her and the quiet responsibility that came with it. The next day, Mia arrived again, a little earlier than usual. She looked nervous but determined, her small bag clutched tightly to her chest. Lila greeted her with a warm smile. Good to see you, she said. Did you have a good night? Mia nodded slowly. Yes, she whispered. I thought about what you said, about being normal. Lila's heart lifted. And, she asked gently, and I want to keep coming here, Mia said, her voice gaining a little strength. I like it. It's my place, where no one cares about money or who my dad is. Just me. Tears pricked Lila's eyes. She had expected a difficult day, full of awkwardness and tension, but instead she felt a quiet relief. The girl had chosen her, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Lila realized that sometimes the most important moments in life were not the grand ones. They were the small, quiet decisions made from trust and love. Days turned into weeks, and Mia continued her visits. Her father occasionally stopped by, always polite, always careful, but never imposing. Lila maintained her gentle distance, knowing that her role was not to interfere but to offer consistent support. She served meals, offered warm drinks, listened patiently, and shared quiet conversations. Mia gradually relaxed more, laughing softly at jokes Lila made, sharing little stories from school and even drawing pictures for her as she always had. Lila noticed that the girl's guarded nature remained in small ways. Mia still hesitated to speak about her father's world, still seemed cautious around strangers, still clung to the routines they had built together. But the bond between them had grown stronger, built not on wealth or status, but on human connection, patience, and care. Lila realized that this bond was rare, something precious that could not be measured in money or possessions. One evening, after closing the diner, Mia stayed behind to finish a drawing. Lila watched her quietly, noticing the concentration and care in every small movement. She realized that these moments, the quiet, ordinary moments, were the ones that truly mattered. They built trust, confidence, and a sense of belonging. And in a world that could be confusing and overwhelming, Mia had a safe place where she could be herself. Lila also began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt more confident, more patient, and more capable of handling the hardships of life. Caring for Mia had given her purpose beyond her own struggles. It reminded her that kindness, patience, and presence could create meaning even in the simplest acts. One day, Mia looked up at Lila, her small face serious. "Do you think my dad will understand why I like this place?" she asked softly. Lila thought carefully. "I think he will," she said finally. "He may not understand everything about why this place is special to you, but he will understand that you feel safe and happy here. That matters more than anything else." Mia nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. She returned to her drawing, feeling reassured. Lila watched her for a moment, realizing that the little girl had a world of her own, a world that was both fragile and strong, shaped by careful choices and quiet resilience. As the weeks passed, Mia's visits continued and her father occasionally appeared. Always polite, always attentive, but never overbearing. Lila's role remained the same, a constant presence, a source of warmth and care, a place where the little girl could be herself without fear or judgment. And though the truth about Mia's life was becoming clearer, it didn't change the bond they had built. Lila had learned that trust, love, and care were more powerful than wealth or status. In the quiet corners of the diner, over simple meals and shared conversations, a friendship had grown that was unshakable, built on patience, kindness, and genuine human connection. Lila didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know how Mia's life outside the diner would unfold, or what challenges lay ahead. But she knew one thing. In that small, cozy diner, a child had found a safe place, and she, a struggling young woman, had found a purpose that made her heart full. And so, as the days moved forward, their story continued, quiet, ordinary, yet extraordinary in the impact it had on both their lives. Little did Lila know the final piece of the story. The full revelation and the changes it would bring was only a matter of time. The morning sunlight poured through the diner windows, casting long golden rays across the worn wooden floor. Lila wiped down the counters, arranging plates and cups with care as she usually did, but today her heart felt unusually full. It had been a week since Mia had told her about her father, and while life outside the diner was still a mystery, their bond had only grown stronger. Lila had seen the quiet strength in the girl, the resilience, the small courage she carried even in the face of a world far bigger than herself. Mia arrived shortly after school, her small bag bouncing on her shoulder as always. But today there was a lightness in her step, a faint smile on her face that seemed to shine brighter than usual. She waved shyly at Lila before settling into her corner table. Lila poured a cup of hot chocolate and placed it in front of her, noticing how Mia's small hands wrapped around it as if drawing warmth not just from the drink, but from the care it represented. "You seem happy today," Lila said softly, trying not to sound too curious. Mia nodded, her eyes sparkling slightly. "I am," she whispered. I talked to my dad yesterday. He said I can come here whenever I want."
"He said this is my place and he won't try to stop me." Lila's heart leapt.
She smiled warmly, feeling a quiet relief and joy. "See? Sometimes adults just need to understand what's important to children, and you've shown him that this place matters to you." Mia sipped her hot chocolate slowly, then reached for her small notebook. "I drew something for you," she said, pushing the paper across the table. Lila leaned over and looked. It was a drawing of the diner, the sunlight pouring in through the windows, the chairs and tables perfectly arranged, and a small figure sitting in the corner with a cup of cocoa. Next to her, Lila had been drawn smiling behind the counter, her arms open as if welcoming everyone who came in. Lila's eyes welled with tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you, Mia. I will treasure this forever." Mia smiled shyly, hiding her excitement behind her small hands. "I wanted you to know. I like it here because you care about me, not because of anything else." Lila reached across the table and gently touched Mia's hand. "And I always will. Nothing about who you are or who your father is will ever change that." Just then the door opened and Mia's father entered the diner. He looked around quietly, his sharp eyes noticing the details, the polished counters, the warm atmosphere, the way his daughter sat, comfortable and safe. Lila greeted him with a polite nod, not needing to say more. There was an understanding between them, an unspoken agreement that this place, this bond, was sacred. He walked over to Mia's table and knelt down slightly, his tall frame casting a protective shadow over her. "Hello, my little one," he said softly. "Are you happy here?"